Okay. I guess I'm live. So hey everybody. First I want to thank you for your patience. I'm going to try to get through this as quickly as possible, but I'm going to also not try to miss too many things that I had planned for today. We had some technical problems just kind of getting set up, so hopefully this will go pretty smooth. All right, so I first want to just really talk about and maybe show you some really pretty interesting DataViz. So the first thing I want to show you is this globe of economic complexity. I mean, this is just a pretty amazing DataViz, and just when you play with it a little bit, it really just has it's crazy. I mean, you can look at this thing. It really just shows connections between different countries, and I just really want to kind of get into some fantastic viz, because it's super important. I think that as web developers, we're like creating data visualizations pretty much all the time, and data is everywhere. And we've moved past big data into a tsunami of just enormous data. Data is just everywhere. Decision makers are being flooded with too much information, esoteric dashboards, colors, pulsing bars. We're securing this data, visualizing this, and what are we all doing it for? The goal of this presentation today is for us to explore how we can really approach any data set that's out there and provide our audiences with finding some real gems. And what I mean by gems, I mean insights in the data. And let me just continue on with that. And I'm going to really kind of break this talk up into 3 parts. The first part is going to be about why we need DataViz. The second part is really going to be about some tools, and we're going to talk about that very quickly. And then we're also going to talk about what is DataViz. At the very end, I am going to go back and do a little bit of a tutorial, but not too much of one. Maybe we'll get a little heavier when we actually do the student version. So, all right. First of all, let's kind of approach this first question that we've got here. Why do we need DataViz? And we're talking about exabytes of data, exabytes. So we were thinking exactly what that was, and I don't know, man. What was that? Like 1 million terabytes or something? Or
it's a million terabytes.
So just the way I like to think about it is this: every second that we're broadcasting right now, if we look at the whole entire internet, there's close to the same amount of data that's flowing every single second on the internet today as there was on the entire internet 20 years ago. So that's just a ridiculous amount of data. Today our problem really is not about collecting data, not about where we're getting our data from. It's really what do we do with it after we've collected it. And the second point I want to make about why do we need it is it's because DataViz makes numbers and things and ideas very human for us. So when we have an Excel spreadsheet, it's full of stuff. It's got all of our company data, and we know that we can't really individualize, look at every individual piece of data one at a time. We can only see and hold one value at a time. And we need this data. We need it to inform us, to enlighten our business practices, really inform the way we teach and how to interact with others. And lucky for us, we've got a tool that we can use our brains to do more than just imagine this data. We can also really consume this data. And consuming the data is what I want to talk about, because that's when we enter data visualization. So very quickly, what are some of the tools? What are some of the tools in data? Well, there's D3, there's Tableau, there's Cesium.js, there's this awesome thing called WebGL that's literally lives on every single mobile device and every computer that's out there, basically. And we can leverage all those tools. And like I said, we're going to get back to the tools towards the end of this talk. But the next thing I just want to talk about is really just very briefly about what is data visualization. Data visualization really is just taking something and making it into a picture. Taking data, turning it into a graphical thing that we can look at. So you see on my screen right now, this is some Reddit traffic that Neil deGrasse Tyson kind of, he had a spike, he posted something, and next thing you know, the United States was just blowing up in the middle of the night from looking at his stuff. So this is all we're talking about. Now, the other great thing about data visualization is anyone can do it. Pretty much any small business owner, anybody that's got Excel, anyone that's got access to pretty much any kind of like spreadsheet tool, open office, they can make pie charts, line graphs, pivot tables, bubble charts, you name it. They don't need to know how to program, but they're creating data visualizations all the time. So I want to like start with a couple of gems. And what I mean by gems again is insight. And some kind of points to my story right away. So last year I had the privilege of chairing a couple data visualization summits, one in San Jose and one in Boston. And, you know, I had to come up with a truly awesome talk, you know, because I was talking to data scientists, Novartis, Google, Uber, you know, and I also really came up with something that was very, very personal to me. So I want to share that presentation with you a bit. You know, I used to have this habit every time I traveled, and I used to travel quite a lot. Whenever I got to the airport, I would just go to like the newsstand and I would buy like, you know, a novel. I'd buy like a book. It would either be some instructional thing, or it'd be just like an adventure book or something. And I came across this weird mind map book. And what really kind of caught my eye in this, there's a block quote, right? Like in the first chapter that was there. And, you know, I saw this block quote and it said, "A story is just data with a soul." And it was just so timely for me to read that sentence then, that it really blew me away. My mind was completely blown for a minute, and I really started building up this aha moment. In fact, I decided that at that very second that I saw the sentence, that my next talk was going to be about just this, about how do we create a story and fill it with data. And that's when I said, okay, let's get a little more personal here. Let's talk about my story. So some of you might know that, you know, I was adopted by a Dutch family and I grew up in Chicago. I came to the States when I was about 1 year old, and I spent about, you know, a long time of my life really trying to figure out what the heck was going on in terms of my background, you know, my biological family, you know, how I was going to fit in the world around us. And you know, it really took me a long time to accept who I was. And, you know, I had so many misconceptions about where I'd come from and about other Koreans in this country. And what's really kind of weird is, you know, I started looking at data. You know, I had grown up, you know, in a family that had adopted six children, 5 from Korea, okay? And that was my only data set I had. That was my only connection that I could make to those people around me. And so that really set me up for thinking really some pretty horrible things about Koreans. And I'm gonna kind of go into that a little bit more. But I'd always had these ideas about my biological parents. You know, I thought, oh maybe my mom wasn't married and there was a religious thing going on, and maybe, you know, I didn't really know. But I was definitely being a little stigmatizing towards just this whole idea of why I was here. And so let's talk about you know, some more data that I looked at. You know, so I jumped on, I started using D3, just threw together some ideas. And instead of really unplanned pregnancies back when I was born, it was really more about poverty. You know, the Korean War just ended and there was huge inflation going on. They weren't a first world country yet. And so the Korean government really developed a plan to really send a lot of kids out of the country via adoption so that their social programs wouldn't have to deal with them as much. You know, they were really kind of concerned about their social services. They couldn't afford to pay for all these children that were orphans. So I continue to look at more data. Now I'm going to show you another slide. This is the slide about my family. So my parents, my mom specifically, my mom and dad, they all together had 14 kids. You know, my mom had 6 miscarriages and she adopted 6 other kids. You know, 5 of us from Korea, 1 from the United States. And, you know, from looking at my family, it took me a while to understand that, you know, I really came from a failed family. You know, that concept of failed family was really new to me. And that I got that from my wife's grandma. She sat me down one day and just said, "Hey, you know, Dan, you come from a failed family." that totally blew me away. And I thought about that, but that really helped me kind of get some closure on what was going on. But, you know, when I looked at my family very closely, and you look at this chart, you know, I'm the only one that went to college. I've got a brother who's in jail. You know, half of us basically ended up in divorce. And so a lot of things that were supposed to happen, you know, my parents couldn't afford to pay for college for us. And so I understand why some of my brothers and sisters haven't tried to go to college, but, you know, they just weren't into it. You know, they had other things they wanted to do. But I really kind of had this picture of Koreans in America as being, you know, kind of struggling, kind of that was going to be kind of tough. And that was really just based on just my data. And it's really something, because I started looking at more data, building more little visualizations, and I had this kind of the kids, and I could say, okay, here's me, here are the people, here are the guys that were adopted first, then my sister, and then I just kind of linked each one of these to a Game of Thrones character, just kind of, because it was kind of fun. I was just trying to play with as much data as I could, and I kept on finding this data all over the place on the internet. I ended up connecting with some data from some Korean ministry that was really pretty interesting. So let's get back to some of that data. I just started looking at more and more data, and it really also surprised me how many Koreans were adopted between the period of 1953 and 2000. You can just see from these numbers that just like a lot. And the Koreans really kind of, the Koreans as a country, they kind of decided at one point that it was really after the Olympics that they needed to change this policy, and they need to stop really having kids being put up for adoption. And today, if you go to Korea, it's almost 180. Now Koreans, Korea is so supportive of the children that lived in other countries. You can go to Korea now and literally have a house set up with social workers there that you can meet your biological family, and it's really something pretty interesting. So I started building more things with it. I said, let's see, maybe I can use WebGL to kind of place all these children all around the world, by year in the certain country they were, and build like a pretty interesting little WebGL globe. This is based on a Chrome experiment. And then I started looking at more and more data, and I came across this stuff. And by looking at this data, I saw that, holy cow, Koreans are graduating high school at 94% in 2000 from this is census data here. And they're graduating from college at 61%. All right, that's pretty high. And then if you look at foreign-born Asians, 90%. So just really some fantastic numbers that I had a complete misconception about. Here I was thinking that, all these Koreans out there like me were struggling, they weren't doing well in school, and I was kind of an outlier. And, because I was only comparing my data, my internal data to, I wasn't looking at global data yet. So here's some more data. Labor force. Koreans, again, doing very, very well. If you think about it, aptitude scores, super, super high. Let's see what else we've got. Oh yeah, just Asian to white earnings for native-born Asians, Koreans. And then, kind of looking at the types of jobs that Koreans were taking in America and Asian Americans, we're looking at a lot of computer specialists, doctors and scientists. So it was pretty interesting that all of my ideas about the other people that were living in this country, they were doing pretty well. And my brothers and sisters weren't doing so well. And it really happened because it really changed my whole narrative. It changed everything that I had thought about. And it was a pretty big deal because it just completely changed my worldview in terms of who I am. So let's just look at this now. Let's get to some real actual DataViz. All right, we've been kind of playing around on the edge here, and I've told you a little story about myself. And what's the real message here? How do we create a clear picture? And I always ask, how much obscurity is too much obscurity? Okay, so look at this slide I've got up here. What does this say? And I know I can't hear you, which is kind of weird, but what do you think this says? All right, it says, what do you think? Jumping to conclusions, of course, right? So we've got, this is a DataViz, I've got world, elevation back there. And when we look at it, really, it doesn't say jumping to conclusions at all. In fact, it says something completely different. But with just that little bit of obscurity added there, you got the wrong message. You didn't actually get to know what was there. And that's really kind of interesting to me. I think that's pretty cool. We jump to conclusions a lot. We look at one data set and we say right away, oh, that's it. That's the answer. And then we stop. All right. So the point I'm trying to make with this is, hey, look at a lot of data. Before you draw any conclusions, look at a lot of data. Before you build that data visualization, make sure you've seen a lot of data and you're giving your audiences the real opportunity to learn on their own, the Dojo way. You know, get them to like really dig into that data and don't obscure it so much. Maybe you can clean it up a little bit and present it in a way that's very, very neat and tidy, and they can ingest it right away. But we have to be very careful about over obscuring things, because then we get things like this happening, and we definitely don't want that. Now, I do want to kind of make a quick point. You know, I started to think about how can I do these DataViz? Like, is there a formula for creating awesome DataViz? And so I got to meet Neil deGrasse Tyson a couple years ago at a conference, and he's super tall, and I was just like, whoa, Neil deGrasse Tyson, I need an autograph or something. But I really just asked him one question. I said, you know, hey, what's your approach to kind of your tweets? You're an awesome tweeter. You've got, you know, millions of followers at this point. How did you do it? And he told me this. He said he takes something from science, he takes something that is funny, and then he tries to frame that in a current event, something that's kind of going on. So I put together some tweets, and I'll just read one. You know, to my mom, you know, did you know fart molecules, or hashtag fart molecules, actually travel all the way into your brain? I worry about it more than an actual biological attack, hashtag bootyological terrorism. So I think we can call these as pretty much fails. And I just wanted to use this as a segue into some DataViz that's failed. So look at this. If we remove the label at the bottom, I don't think anyone would really know exactly what this is. But what this is a DataViz created probably by somebody getting paid a lot of money to show us the US military strategy in Iraq. And you can just see this is clearly a fail in terms of DataViz. By looking at this, I don't get anything. So how do we do this? How do we really help our audiences look through these types of things? Here's another one. Love this one. You know, I love the tech savvy band right there, right at the waist. I mean, that's just, this is just so hilarious that I'm just gonna move on. And I wanna tell you I wanna stop and say one thing, going back to my data is just story with a soul. So how do we get that information to our audiences? How do we get our users informed? Well, the way I've really decided is figuring out the narrative and making sure you use the narrative as the guide for your data. So use the story as the guide. When you get lost in some data, go back to the story. Go back to the story and figure out exactly what's there. So let's look at this slide. You all can see what this is, daily sea surface temperature, right? This is actually taken during Hurricane Floyd, and there's a hurricane that goes through the Gulf, and basically there's a drop in temperature, a 5-degree drop almost in the ocean at that point. So, you know, if you know anything about, like, you know, water and storms, you know, if the ocean water is really warm and a big storm comes through there, it's going to get more energy from the water, and it's going to suck all that heat right out of the water. So with that story, I look at this and I say, wow, okay, well, a hurricane came in and then dropped the temperature down 5 degrees, and then it went back up in like 1 day. Okay. Now, what's really true about this data is that what happened is that some sensors in the Gulf went down. And so we had a 3-day blackout where we couldn't see from this certain latitude and longitude. All right. So even though I knew this story and I could look at this data and it's unobscured, you know, I'm just looking at these points, I didn't get it right because I didn't have the right story. Okay. So really use the narrative as a guide. All right. And really, I also think a lot about, like, that DataViz is just really fancy storytelling. All right. So here's the way we look at hurricanes. And I do have a little slide here. So now whenever I see a storm coming out on the East Coast, I'll jump on some high resolution, you know, sea surface temperature data, and I'll just look and see how warm is it out there in the ocean on the track of this storm, because then I'm going to be able to know right away the intensity of that storm. At least I'm going to be able to have some hypothesis about it. I'm going to be able to just guess, oh my gosh, like this might actually be a big storm, because, you know, you really can't necessarily trust the news about those types of things. And you can see this is also during another hurricane here. You can actually see how when the hurricane moves through, it just really drains the heat out of the ocean. All right, let's look at some more DataViz real quick. One more thing is Google Earth Engine. Again, the story. What's the story here? Here's some Landsat data, and I'm focusing in some place in the Amazon. All right, so by just looking at this, you can see, oh, it's fancy. You've got this time series going. What's going on here, though? Well, the story behind this is that this is deforestation in the Amazon. And once you tell that person the little story behind this image, you get it. You go, wow, that's pretty crazy how many trees have just been eradicated in that area. You know, just imagine all the impact that's having down there. Now I want to kind of look at some stuff a little closer to home. Like, look at, here's the California, the golden brown state, all right? This is something that some guys at NASA came up with. You've got this vegetation anomaly, and they've basically taken all these data sets, smashed them together, and created this. So really, the only people that can understand exactly what's going on here is a scientist. Or you know, the scientists can read this because they go, oh, it's vegetation anomaly. Obviously, when I look at these green points, that's kind of showing me, you know, how green it was like 10 years ago. And the brownness is also kind of giving me some other information about how brown it is, where that should be snow right there. And when I get that story, I still look at this and I go still, I don't know if I get it. Why can't I just look at some more simple data? This is too much obscurity here. So when I look at this, here's some MODIS images. I took an image from 2013 and 2014. Now, when you look at this and say, hey, there's a drought in California this year, and look at this data, and they look and they see the snow regions completely missing in 2014, where the year before, tons of snow. Hey, we don't have water. That's why. We can connect it to, you know, less snowfall that year. And that's something that I just came up with right now. And just by looking at these two images, if we go back to this, I wouldn't have been able to know necessarily why, because this is too much obscurity. This is enough. This is enough for anybody to look at and say, yep, we need more snow. And guess what? Down here, see how green it is right there? It's not green anymore, you know, because all the trees have died and everything's gone. So let's kind of like sum this up here. First of all, you know, my personal story, it was just my data. You know, it wasn't the complete picture. You know, my data was obscuring things, so I was jumping to conclusions here. It wasn't until I looked at global data that I was able to broaden my view, and you know, then I had the true story. I really could see clearly what was going on in my life. So how do we recreate that aha moment for our users? How do we do that for the people that we're teaching? We really want to get them into this mode where they're looking for these aha moments, and we can do that by presenting data that they can learn from and letting them make the connections. Again, let them do it. I think we want to make these visualizations, these websites, everything that we're visualizing data with, to give the user enough freedom to kind of make their own conclusions, to draw their own conclusions, and then when they get lost, use the story to kind of correct their path. So again, I'm going to say it again, use this story to kind of correct their path. All right, so that's really my talk. I do have a quick little overview of how I approach building a DataViz app. All right. So first of all, I'd spend the most amount of time figuring out that central idea, that story. What's the narrative here? What am I trying to get across? Okay. The second thing I really want to do is find data. And again, look at a lot of data. Don't fall into the same trap I did when I looked at just that one specific bandwidth of data, like, you know, my own family, and then made a huge judgment, you know, across the entire world, you know, really on over, you know, a couple 100,000 people. You can find so much of this data out there. OpenData.org like serves up data specific for ArcGIS. You've got NASA's got 12 data centers. They're actually, you know, they have to give us all the data out there. You know, any data they collect with their satellites that isn't classified, it gets put out there. And you can even start with my data center, the Atmospheric Science Data Center. There's a lot of good and interesting stuff on there. The next thing is kind of pick your tools. And that's the thing that's really, really been amazing, because we've been able to, there's so many DataViz tools out there. I was talking with Sarah today, and she said, oh my gosh, you're going to talk about D3. And, you know, I've definitely used D3. I don't want to talk about too many of these tools because it will take forever. But I am going to show you something really light and something really easy to get into right away, and that's Three.js. All right, so let me see what my last slide is here. Okay, yeah. Let's shift. All right, and I'm quickly going to show you some stuff here with Three.js. Now, here's some actual code, but I want to go and close a couple of these. All right, so here's that tool I made with that I showed you before, and here's my Three.js tab. Okay. So really good docs on this, and let's just look at some examples of Three.js in action here. And I want to remind you guys that this is all like running in the browser. That's really kind of the amazing thing here. We can do this only because this is the browser. So here's a brick wall. Let's move it around. Let's see. There's some other really good ones that I loved. Let's go look at this one. Oh yeah, this is a great one. Let's see if it loads. And you do have to know that this will hammer your computer sometimes. Like if you're running too many of these, WebGL will just kind of crush your machine. So let's look at some of some different points in space. So as you can see, as I move my cursor around, it's changing in color. It's almost morphing. Let's see, multiple. Yeah, let's look at some morph. Okay, that's a normal one. This is also, if we're considering a morph here, let's look at some cube maps. Really, really, ew. And this is really kind of like, I was thinking more about this, and the thing that came to mind right away was, oh my gosh, WebVR. Well, this is going to be key, using WebGL with WebVR. Let's look at some of the other ones. Oh yeah, this one's pretty creepy. I don't know if I like that at all. All right. Let's look at, and so this is all Three.js, and to get into this is pretty simple, okay? So let's look at some code. First, of course, you have to include Three.js, and I'm not gonna get too deep in this, but to really create a simple demo for this, all you need is really three things. You need a scene, a camera, and a renderer, all right? And you can see them pretty clearly right here. And I've got my camera position out here at 100, so let me just zoom that in a little bit. And let's see what we got. Let's make this a little bit bigger. Oh, I don't know about this. This might be a fail. Okay, so I'm just playing around with this. This section is really kind of defining this cube that's out there. Maybe I can do something like this. Oh, wait, I want to go out a little tiny bit more. A little more. All right, so this is a Three.js, and we can play with this pretty easily. We can make it rotate a little faster. If you want your computer to melt down, we can do like 5. No, it's getting crazier. Let's get even a little crazier. Okay, so I'll share this link with you that you can look at this basic code to just kind of get something running. And within a few minutes, you can really figure out this code and implement it. Let's see, let's look at something else. Now, I want to show you something there's tons of data in this data tool that I was working on. And so I had to come up with a way to take all of these parameters and show them in a way that this used to be a Gantt chart. Somebody used to make something out of Visio and actually just export a picture. So I said, now we've got to bring this up a little. We got to crank this up a notch. So all these parameters, and there are about 400 some parameters here in this system. You can see I've got it color coded here a bit. It links to this DataViz tool that I've spent the last 6 years of my life working on, and we can visualize some data. Let's update this plot. All right, so this data specifically is some clear sky shortwave upward flux. So if you know what that is, awesome. Like it's really interesting, pretty interesting stuff. Let's look at some other the WebGL stuff. So this isn't necessarily a DataViz per se, but it could be used for something along those lines. I also want to kind of key you in on something like this is the timeline app that I use this library to create this stuff, and this is just a really awesome demo that can show you all this stuff, how it works. We can even drag these around. Really easy to get into, and you can have something built very quickly. Here's something I built with the WebGL just to kind of track users. Where are users coming from? And see each one of these stacks on these countries show a specific latitude and longitude of a school that's participating with these observations, these satellite matching observations. All right, so let's see, what else can I show you? I thought this was a pretty neat kind of visualization of these meteors, And again, this is doing something to really not only pique someone's interest, but get them into the story. So sometimes we're not just creating the story. We're saying, here's this story about meteors. Come on, why is this interesting for you to look at? But by just looking at this, you can look at this and learn. There have been more and more meteorites, okay, which I thought was pretty fascinating. All right, so that's pretty much the end of my talk. I want to thank everyone for coming out and just spending the time with me. If you have any questions, feel free to email. Thank you.